men who have affairs tend to have affairs with a larger number of affair partners. And so, which then by definition can't be long lasting. You can't have long-term affairs with 6 different partners.
Yeah, unless he's juggling multiple phone accounts or something.
Right. And some men try to do that, but
everything can be found.
Yes.
I'm certain of that.
You don't need an 8,000 word expose to tell you that there's something deeply wrong with Andrew Huberman, a Stanford biology professor, and he's not a dark triad apex predator. He is a garden variety narcissist with addiction problems.
But I had a bad feeling about him when he came out against alcohol. At one point about a year ago, Matthew was sending me a ton of Huberman clips about how you shouldn't drink alcohol.
Yeah.
And how even one glass of alcohol is so detrimental to blah, blah, blah. And I really flipped. I was like, he needs to stop running his mouth. He doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. I was like, stress is the real killer. Shut up.
This is a guy who like goes on Rogan to sell people on the science behind toxic people, and then it turns out he's a toxic person himself. The problem
Big
with a man
surprise.
always working on himself is that he may also be working on you. So true, Queen. And the smoking gun of the story is that he was dating multiple women at the same time while promising them exclusivity. And at first it appears that there's really nothing there.
Yeah, it follows the tried and true form of a Me Too piece,
Right.
where there's been some kind of like transgression.
Yeah.
But all it really amounts to are these interpersonal like wrongdoings.
Right.
He has not raped anybody.
The essay by this woman who posed as a fan and went digging for dirt, and friend of the pod and also friend of Huberman, Sagar and Jetty, did a whole segment on all these friendly emails she sent to Huberman's team originally, and they never responded. So then she goes lower and lower down the totem pole and finds jilted exes and associates.
Who all the article keeps reiterating that they're ungroomable in their like pedigree and temperament. He specifically was like a seducer, high functioning.
Yes. Of course, it's like ironic to accuse someone of being a cheater and a manipulator when your idea of doing your job is literally cheating and manipulating.
You're a journalist, yeah.
Susie Weiss, Barry Weiss's sister, pointed out, quote, "The irony of New York Mag publishing a cover story which asks us to believe that these successful independent women lack the agency to leave their cheating boyfriend who didn't prioritize them. Meanwhile, last week's cover story argued that children have the agency to change their sex. Weird." What's sad about this genre of journalism is that there's a lot of people who take it at face value, not because they're actually outraged, but because they're petty and small-souled people who lack the receptors for principled critique. And the discourse rewards our basest impulses.
Yes.
And I think the sad thing about Me Too is not that a bunch of innocent men got caught up and had their lives ruined, but that it snowballed into something that went far beyond sex and was sort of a template for the COVID response and the racial reckoning. It made it okay to ruin anyone's life on the flimsiest pretext. Like, this is all true.
Well, remains to be seen if Huberman's life will really be ruined. And it poked pre-dented maybe holes in the image of himself that he attempted to craft.
Yes, yeah.
His life, he's not an honest actor. It's
Right.
like it's all what goes around comes around. It all will be
Karma,
revealed.
baby. But the author is fundamentally right. He's too good to be true.
Don't trust anyone that tells you not to drink alcohol.
Yes, totally. The whole Me Too angle is really the least interesting part of it. And as usual, the right-wing guys missed the whole point and made it into a story about how the Longhouse strikes again and just trying to clip the wings of successful white men. And there is some truth to that. But I think what looks like a kind of sleazy takedown of the Me Too character of a guy who like technically didn't do anything wrong is really like an awesome and amazing case study in narcissistic personality disorder.
Yeah.
It's a really incredible document.
Well, he had this main partner,
Sarah,
and how she, through like organizational, high executive functioning, type A mind, was able to connect all of these dots and join forces with all these other like jilted women.
right, through Instagram. And then they became
who all were like signaling to one another through like a psychotic, like undignified for women of this age bracket, I think.
So Susie, Barry's sister, wrote a very cute and funny article on this for the Free Press, who's afraid of Andrew Huberman. Here's a quote. I'm not saying it's great that Andrew Huberman in one single day managed to fly in one of his girlfriends to California from Texas, only to leave her with his dog to meet another girlfriend at a coffee shop and talk about their relationship before texting yet another to thank her for being so next level, gorgeous and sexy, and then sending yet another message to get another girlfriend, sleep well, beautiful. Not great at all. It's gross. He's the kind of guy I would urge my friends to avoid, though if I'm being honest, that sheer feat of scheduling also displays the sort of take control of life optimization he's famous for. He tells one of the girls that he wants to have children with her and gets her to do IVF, but ends up giving her high-risk HPV
right?
instead.
Yeah. Who already had 2 children from
from a previous
partner, which she claims he berated her for and would fly into like insane rage.
A lot of people were asking, like, well, why would somebody who's not in a committed relationship want to do IVF with their partner? And it's because narcissists are always kicking the can down the road and always making promises they can't keep because they are committed in one way. They're like truly committed to the bit. So they will say or do anything. He tells one woman, yeah, he's not a sex addict, he's a love addict. And so then another woman, an actress, heard him say on Rogan that he had a girlfriend. She texted him to ask about it, and he responded immediately. He had a stalker, he said. And so his team had decided to invent a partner for the listening public. His ability to spin a plausible web of lies under pressure is truly impressive.
Well, he's a control freak. That's why he hates alcohol.
Huberman disappearing was something of a pattern. Friends, girlfriends, and colleagues described him as hard to reach. Also, just like me, for real.
So true.
I know about this personality type because I've been with men like this, and I'm halfway one of these men myself. And it's a personal research interest of mine. The narcissistic personality, which I think is really the generational pathology of our time. Sarah, the main interview subject, she basically relays how when they fought, he fixated on her past choices and sexual history. And that was straight out of TLP's seminal 2010 primer on NPD as a generational pathology. Shame over guilt, rage over anger, masturbation over sex, envy over greed, your future over your past, but her past over her future. A friend of his said, I think Andrew likes building up people's expectations and then actually enjoys the opportunity to pull the rug out from under you. And then Andrew himself says, I'd like to emphasize that this podcast is part of my desire and effort to bring zero cost to consumer information about science and science-related tools to the general public. So clearly this is a guy who cares more about validation from some nameless, faceless audience than he does about honoring his personal commitments because they place demands on him that he cannot fulfill, and they also see him for what he is. In other words, they fail to mirror his ego ideal that he's built up in his mind but can't possibly live up to. And so those people in the narcissist's worldview, when they learn the truth and start to advocate for themselves, are very quickly vilified and discarded. So there's this record of him telling these women that the other ones were crazy or psychopaths or prone to like trying to kill his dog.
Obsessed with his dog.
He's a classic narcissistic personality. The fixation on self-improvement, the commitment to sobriety. He's described as a good listener who gives good advice. The cynical read on that being that these people want to maintain an image.
I bet I could do a number on him, honestly.
Yeah.
I bet I could get him to fall.
He doesn't want to meet. He doesn't want to meet some girls like us who see right through him, but are good at playing dumb about it.
I could rip this guy to shreds, no problem.
He also has this like ready-made sob story about how he was the child of divorce and only therapy could save him.
Yeah. No, the therapeutic language in his like text correspondences with these women where he's like, I am hearing you and your pain and I am ready.
Your pain is valid.
And I am ready to do the repair work necessary. Like it's all this very like hyper impersonal jargon that he's like employing to basically just like manipulate people. It's very, very dark.
Yeah, and he's of course very hot. At least until he opens his mouth.
I do not find him hot.
His voice and tattoos did give me the ick, but he's hot in the sense that he looks like a classic man. The more masculine looking you are in this day and age, the more like womanish and preening you tend to be. But this is a very typically masculine personality disorder. It's not
The NPD,
particularly-
BPD classic pairing comes to mind.
I don't think he's like officially sober, but he's a guy who demonizes alcohol, and he would say like, you know, I don't tell people to quit alcohol, but people said that they felt very judged in his presence when they were drinking.
Even one drink will disrupt, will not optimize your sleep. What the fuck is wrong with this? Like, I'm into Ray Pete. I'm not into dogmatic nutritional advice. I'm into making stuff up and drinking McDonald's and drinking alcohol.
He's clearly a guy with control and addiction issues. That's why AA works, because it formalizes informal bonds, making them easier for the narcissist to tolerate. And like,
well, it also makes, I mean, I believe in AA. I know a lot of people.
No, I don't want to downplay or belittle it, because it does like meaningfully, functionally work. But my hottest take is that addiction is just narcissism, and that the addiction masks the narcissism. And people much more readily identify as addicts than they do as narcissists. And I don't want to demonize narcissists more than they're already demonized, because God knows they suffer a lot, because they
of course
have very shallow, impoverished emotional lives.
Yeah. Well, the thing that is effective about AA, Huberman seems like the type, right, who is not in the program, but claims to exercise some control over his life through sobriety. But like, really his issue is spiritual.
Yeah, and I think people have this impression of narcissists that they're uniquely calculating and treat other people's as pawns in their sick and twisted little game. And that's true, but it's not because they're powerful. It's because they're literally desperate and pathetic. Yeah. And once you know that, they cease to be so scary and intimidating. Yeah. This is not an enviable type. You don't want to be a narcissist.
No.
They are calculating, but not in the way that people think, because they really do think that they mean what they say in the moment when they pepper you with like romantic or erotic bon mots.
But it's all for their own benefit. It's not real. Like,
yeah, they like novelty and intensity and intrigue, because it makes them feel something when they typically feel nothing. The interesting thing about narcissists is that they're like halfway between a neurotic and a psychotic type. They're not psychotic enough for them to not be functional.
Yeah, to be like antisocial.
Yeah, or schizophrenic. Yeah. So they're able to move through life with like a relative degree of social and financial and romantic success.
And they're not neurotic enough to have a kind of like crippling self-awareness that hinders them from achieving certain goals.
I mean, often they do have a certain self-awareness, but
it benefits them.
But it benefits them because they can play other people and play them against each other. And they're also very like intensely private and controlling over their image, obviously, to like the point of being secretive. Yeah. So something like this expose is probably like very agonizing for a guy like Huberman. In spite of being that way, they do like thrive on drama and intrigue, and while accusing other people of being the dramatic ones when they like inevitably take the bait.
Yeah. When him and Sarah decided to pursue IVF, spokesperson for Huberman denies that he and Sarah had decided to have children together, clarifying that they, quote, decided to create embryos by
like
IVF.
What? Okay, but that's the same thing.
Like, you were doing an even more arduous, kind of like complicated thing in order to.
Yeah, you were doing something more
attempt
evil
to procreate
and ethically indefensible. But Huberman, I think, is interesting not because he's an aberration from the norm, but because he's very exemplary of the moment. It is like the generational pathology, and him being professionally exceptional, I think, is what allows everyone to distance themselves from the shades and grades of this common lot. It's like Tony Soprano being the mob boss of New Jersey when the real plot of the show is him being a middle-aged narcissist.
Yeah.
So here's a good quote. The relationship struck Sarah's friends as odd. At one point, Sarah said, "I just want to be with my kids and cook for my man." I was like, "Who says that?" says a close friend. "I mean, I've known her for 30 years. She's a powerful, decisive, strong woman. We grew up in this very feminist community. That's not a thing either of us would ever say." So it's basically like a woman expressing a totally natural and healthy impulse, and her like narcissistic fake feminist friends immediately shooting her down.
Yeah.
But a doctor friend of mine who asked me to address this topic specifically made a very incisive point, which is that he was very careful about dating women who didn't need him So women with children, women with careers, women with their own money.
Right.
These aren't like poor little victims who are susceptible to grooming and bereft of agency.
Right.
Like if you can start an LLC, you can clock a cheater.
Apparently not.
Apparently not.
I mean,
But that's deliberate too.
well, it also kind of serves his narcissistic fantasy of what kind of like partner he.
It serves the
cognitive
narcissistic fantasy of a partner who's a mirror for him.
Yeah, he's not out there with like art hose.
Yeah, but it
'Cause
also
they'd be having like BPD meltdowns.
serves his narcissistic anxiety of ever getting too close to another person who might truly see him for what he is. And like juggling many women at a time also serves that person, that purpose.
It's sad.
And I think these guys very often demonstrate a pretty impressive level of self-awareness, which like the Kernberg school would call pseudo self-awareness. And that's how they gain people's confidence and trust. Because I think women go into these situations thinking like, I can fix him.
My impression as someone who is like viscerally repulsed by Huberman on many levels, all of these women that were like caught up in this web of lies. He met some of them on Raya. They themselves have a spiritual deficiency that like no hubris, but like couldn't be me. Like
No hubris.
no hubris, but like never would I be like, ooh, like this man is so successful with his neuroscience. Like they all also were of this very specific type of woman.
Who were attracted to kind of the signifiers, the markers. It flattered them that a guy like that could be interested in them.
Exactly.
Women go into situations like this thinking you can fix a guy if you meet a man who is in his 40s or 50s, is handsome, sexy, successful, intelligent, and still single and childless.
Yeah.
There is something horribly wrong with him and you should run for the hills. There's no riddle there. It's just that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And men like that, they may lie and cheat and deceive you, but they're telling you everything you need to know from the moment that you met them.
Yeah.
I don't know. Who knows? I'm an optimist. Maybe there are outliers or success stories. Maybe you meet a man in the twilight of his whoring years and he makes the decision that it would be nice to have someone like wheel him around his property in a wheelchair.
And that could be you, sis.
Yeah, and women find themselves in these situations because when you're on that tip, on that level, by then all the good ones are already taken.
Basically every woman described in this piece, I think, also is suffering from a kind of like narcissistic delusion.
Yes, but they can't acknowledge that, and he makes it easy for them to never acknowledge that because he's such a kind of like overt extreme case.
Well, yeah,
but that's the way our society functions. That's why TLP calls it a generational pathology, because nowadays when you try to broach this topic, everyone goes, well, you're projecting and you're the narcissist.
Yeah, I mean, it's also typical and timeless for people, women and men both, to like with narcissistic disturbances to partner with people that are fundamentally like emotionally unavailable because they then get to preserve their narcissistic idea of themselves as someone who is trying so hard to be with someone and is this perfect partner,
they want to
but
be
like
of
someone
service.
else is failing them, and like so they get to maintain their own delusions of like having been failed and disappointed by someone because they're the narcissist, but like really it's this like narcissistic like human centipede.
It is, yeah.
The mundanity of intimacy is intolerable to people like this because they prefer to have the drama of like the betrayal and the unavailability
they
and
like
and they get to imagine themselves as this like
besieged
victim,
and
heroine
beleaguered,
kind of person. But really it fucking takes two, and there are no victims, there are only volunteers.
Yeah, most people are not like Andrew Huberman.
Well, that's for sure.
They lack the vision and the will to enact such a massive Tower of Babel of intrigue and chaos.
Yeah.
And they lack the truly like empty and rotten core. because they are in one way or another tethered to reality and humanity. But I think all of us, especially those of us who spend a lot of time on the internet, are really touched by the illness. And I think like being on social media literally makes you a much more narcissistic person because it refracts your image back to you through like the voices of your fans and haters.
Yeah.
When the other person is also in a glass box, you have a problem. When everyone around you is in a glass box, you have America.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Huberman's prominence so resonant is that deep down everyone feels a lack of control, and he exemplifies a kind of like pathological control that one could exert over their like health and personal life.
And of course, as everyone knows, the key to happiness is relinquishing control.
Yeah. The language in one of his correspondences, let me find. He says, "I'm willing to do the repair work on this." He said when she called him out for standing her up.
I'm willing.
"This sucks, but doesn't deter my desire and commitment to see you and establish clear lines of communication and trust." I mean, that is sociopathy. Just why not bow out at that point?
The narcissist feels unhappy because he thinks his life isn't as it should be or things are going wrong, but all those feelings find origin in a frustration, a specific frustration, the inability to love the other person. He's a man in a glass box, unable to connect. He thinks the problem is that people don't like him or not enough, so he exerts massive energy into the creation and maintenance of an identity. If they think of me as X, ... But that attempt is always futile, not because you can't trick the other person. You can for an entire lifetime. It's quite easy. But even then, the man in the box is still unsatisfied, still frustrated, because no amount of identity maintenance will break that glass box.
So true.
So true. I'm not mad at Huberman. I'm sad for Huberman.
I'm mad at him for his prohibitionist
Yeah.
views. Have been since I found out about him, but yeah, no, I definitely am not like, I don't have a chip on my shoulder or anything about it. It seems really dark and sad, and for all involved.
It'll be interesting, or not that interesting, I don't really care, to see what happens to him.
I'll definitely probably never think about him again.